Hi everybody, I'm going to show you today how to make a bar graph. Here I've got a table set up, but you'll notice that first of all these cells over here are a bit hard to read. So I'm going to select the whole sheet, click on Format, Text Wrapping and Wrap, and that will expand the cells so they're all nicely visible. So different soft drinks over here, each with Mentos added and how high the foam went. The first thing we want to do is figure out for the three trials what is the mean, because we only want to plot the mean against the type of drink. So to type the mean, I'm going to click on that cell, hit equals and then sum, and that tells the computer that I'm going to get ready to add something. Open a bracket, highlight these cells, close the bracket, and it's going to add up what's in those cells. Press the slash key to divide, and because I have three numbers, I'm going to divide by 3, hit enter, and there is my mean. Now if I want to make that happen all the way down, I'm going to grab this blue box, drag it all the way down and let go, and it calculates all my means. Now it's really good science that your mean shouldn't be any more accurate than the tool you use to measure with. So these are only good to the ones column, right? So I'm going to round all this to the ones column. I'm going to highlight all those numbers, and up here I've got my decimal shift buttons. If I just play around with these, it'll round to different positions. But I'm going to round to the ones column because my tool couldn't be any more accurate than that. That is my mean. You notice it's changed colors a little bit because it's trying to copy the color that I used all the way down here. But for now, that's great. Well, I'm just going to tidy up my cells now so the colors still make sense. So I'm going to click in that cell, change the color to the light blue, and then hit Control Y every time I want that to repeat. Now for the bar graph. We're not going to plot the trials, we're going to plot the means and the soft drinks. So I'm going to select this stuff first. This will be my x-axis, or the bottom of my graph. I'm going to just highlight the first cell and holding my mouse down, drag all the way down, let go of my mouse. Now I'm going to hold down the Control button on my keyboard. If you have a Mac, you use Command. Hold that down, click in this cell and drag again. And now they're all perfectly matched. And I'm going to now either click on this Insert Chart button, or if your resolution means you can't see that button, you go Insert Chart, and it will try to give me a graph. Now, normally you wouldn't see a horizontal graph like this. So I'm going to stay in Chart Types, scroll down a bit here, and click on the column. And that looks a lot more like a graph that we might see comparing different results like this. I'm going to hit Insert, and that's my graph so far. Right, I'm going to now put some details on my graph. I can click it and drag it around, and all my editing now is going to be through this little arrow and the advanced edit option. I'm going to pop in there now, and the first thing we'll do is give it a title. Just check you're in the customization tab. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to put geyser height when Mentos is added to different fizzy drinks. Leave that for now. Click somewhere else and it will populate that with the title. Coming down a bit on the horizontal here, I'm pretty happy with how those labels are laid out, but I could change color and font if I wanted to here. If I want to change the slant of the names, I could do that too, have them completely under, but I think the default view is pretty easy to read. I'm going to come back up to the vertical axis now, the left vertical, because this needs a name. We need to know what these numbers are. Now the title here is geyser height, and that was measured in centimeters. I'm going to hit enter. Now at the moment, it's really hard to see between 0 and 25 what these numbers might be. So I'm going to tell it to start at 0 and go all the way up to 80 to see what that does. That's my highest number. I might just make that 85. Now at the moment, that kind of still looks hard to read. Going up in 20s is pretty broad. So I can play around with my major numbers here. This is the division that you find on this side. So if I change it to tens, it's trying to cleverly figure out between 0 and 85, how can it make that neat? So I've kind of struck it lucky here with 9. Going up in 9s means that this graph goes up in 10s on the scale. I still can't read between 10 and 20, so I'm going to add some more lines here. Now if I add these, you'll see that it gives me more options. If I went 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, that looks pretty good, and I can line this up here now. I'm just going to see what happens if I make that 90. Yep, that still looks pretty good. In fact, it's nice to end on a whole number there, a whole division of your scale. And at the moment, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to click Update. And at this point, my graph is pretty much done. This thing over here is the trend. It's linked to all these numbers here. I can move it around if I want, but I don't really need to have it, so I'm going to get rid of it. That's it now. My graph is done. Okay, so that first graph was for when you have the same number of trials for each graph. Here I've got some data where we carried out a rolling mean. So using 200 gram masses on either no pulley or one pulley or two pulleys with a Newton meter attached, we figured out what the weight force was. So you can see here for trial 1, this was the reading, and so that's the mean at that point. After 2 trials, the next reading was 2, so the mean now is 1.9. And as the trials go on, the mean keeps adjusting itself, so it's a rolling changing mean. So after 6 trials, the mean was 1.6. Over here, we got to 9 trials, and the mean had kind of turned out to be 1.5. Over here for one fixed and one free pulley, it was 8 trials, and the mean hadn't really changed much from 0.4 right since the beginning. So how do I plot a graph like this? Here's what I need to do. Now Google Sheets is going to have a hard time trying to graph all these oddly spaced sort of cells. And when you have merged cells like I have up here, it gets a little bit more complicated again. So what I need to do is ignore all that. I'm going to make a new simple table down here and use that for my data, for the graph. So what I've done now is I'm going to set up a little table down here. I've put my 3 conditions that I set up, and here I'm going to just copy the final mean from each cell. In fact, I'm going to type it just so there's no issues with formatting and colors. So if you look carefully, I've matched up my final mean to each one, and I can now start to get my graph going. So what I'm going to do is highlight the x-axis again first. This is the bottom axis. Hold down Control, or if you're on a Mac, Command. Highlight the values for the y-axis, which is the vertical axis. You can click on Insert Chart, or go Insert Chart if your resolution's not letting you do that. Again, we get that horizontal graph, but if I stay in Chart Types and I come down to Column, now I can pretty clearly see my bars, and I can go Insert, and here is my final graph ready to go, ready to be formatted. Okay, so back into my advanced edit. Time to start formatting this again. I'm going to give it a title. This is Support Forces for a 200 gram mass with different numbers of pulleys. Coming down to my horizontal axis. This actually needs a name, and this is the number of pulleys. My vertical axis now needs to have all numbers sorted. I can probably stay as 2 as my highest, so if I can go minimum 0, maximum 2. But I'm not happy about going up in 0.5, so I'm going to play around with the major axis here, see what I can do. That's now going up in 0.2s. Look, so that's quite handy. And in between each one, there should be one division, so there's 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, which makes a lot of sense. My left vertical needs a title. I thought I added that, but we'll try that again. Support force in newtons. I think I forgot that last time. Click outside. There it is. And at this point, I could click Update. I can click on my little series number over here and change that to none. And for now, I think that graph is pretty good to go. And just one final thing, you notice that 2 and 1 are actually not rounded to this first decimal place like my measurements are. And that's because I've manually typed in these numbers. They're not actually rounded by the computer. So if I highlight those and then just play around with the rounding button, they're now rounded by the computer to the first decimal place. And you can see that my numbers here have jumped in response to that. Everything now is rounded to 1 decimal place. And that brings us to the end of our video on bar graphs in Google Sheets. Thanks for watching.